Welcome to the ZSK video on starting embroidery. First of all, I want to show you on the T8 controller, I did load our design using a transport code. And the first thing I'd like to point out to you on this is that this section right here on our screen, we have a little needle with a number next to it. This actually means the current needle that the embroidery machine is on. Below it are the colors that the design is going to use, and because we use the transport code, it does read the actual colors of the design. Now, to make sure that we have the correct colors to needles, we need to make sure that the color to needle association is correct. So I'll go ahead and hit R5. If I hit the info button and this button, it says needle assign. So that's the button that we would like. I'll go ahead and press that button, and here you can see the colors that we need to use. I've got white, yellow, red, and black. So for this, I have put in the number 5 for 1, meaning that needle 5 has the color white on it. Then as I tab over, I can input with these numbers here the next color. Now, number 7, needle number 7, has yellow on it, so I've assigned number 7 to stitch where that yellow is, and so on and so forth. Once I am finished, I can hit the confirm button. Now, if I am using a DST file, typically we enter in the actual needle changes itself, so we usually want defaults to be assigned, meaning that needle 1 under here should be color 1. Color 2 should be needle 2, so on and so forth, because that's typically how we bring in the design. If you have more questions, make sure to reference back to loading a DST. So I'm going to go ahead and confirm these settings. Once I've confirmed these settings, I can now see that color 1 is going to refer to needle 5, so on and so forth. So right now I am on needle 7. I do need to line up my needle, whichever needle that I am on, to the center point of my design. The center point I have already marked here in my hoop, and that's what I need to line the needle up with. Typically, it's easiest to line this point up with needle number 1. It's easiest to see. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to stitch with needle number 1, but we're just using it as a reference point to line up. So the first things first is I am going to change needle 7 to needle 1. And to do that, I would hit R4. So if I hit the I button and R4, needle change. I need to click on needle change. Down at the bottom here, you will see needles 1 through 8, and then if you need to choose 9 through 12, you can click this button here and it'll show you the other needles available. I'll go ahead and hit number 1. Now I do need to confirm it. On the right hand side of my area right here, the light is on, and I just confirm with the green circle. So I've now moved to needle number 1, and I'd like to make sure that needle now lines up with that center point. I now need to go to my pantograph movement. With my pantograph movement, I have to switch this light over to the pantograph movement side, and to do this, I just click on the ZSK button. So after pressing that, you can now see I am on the pantograph movement. With the pantograph movement, we do have different settings and different speeds. To get to those speeds, we would hit U5 right here. It'll say pantograph configuration. Click on that, and once here, I have 4 different settings that I can change between: fast, slow, 10 pulses at a time, or 1 pulse at a time. I want to go to the slow, the snail, so I press that, and now I'm in slow mode. By using these different arrows, I can move front, back, up, and left and right. So I'll go ahead and use the up arrow. You can see that my pantograph is actually moving backwards, and I'm moving closer to that center point. If I need to move in smaller increments, I can always hit the 10 or the 1 and maybe move 10 pulses at a time. Or if I click 1, I can use 1 pulse at a time. This really helps for that exact placement. In addition, we can use that rabbit, that if I do press and hold, it will move at a faster pace. The other things that I have available here are the needle up and needle down. This feature right here is very, very helpful when I need to have that exact alignment. If I press that, my needle will come down, and if I press that even more, you can see that it will actually come down in smaller increments. Now you want to make sure that it doesn't come down too far where you're in the fabric or that it's through into the needle plate, because you don't want to bend that needle or damage anything underneath the shirt here. I will go ahead and take my movement, move it to the center here. If that is correct and I'm happy with that, I can then move the needle up and go into the trace mode. If I'm finished, I can hit the needle up and move that back up. And now I'm ready to go and trace. So now I have the hoop in position with my center point. I always need to make sure that my needle is not going to hit the hoop. And a huge rule of thumb is that you always want to choose the correct hoop for your design. If you do hit a hoop, this can be very unfortunate and it can cause major problems within the inside of the machine. No matter what machine you have, you always want to trace no matter what before stitching. So in order to get to the trace function, first we need to get out of the pantograph movement. So we will press the arrow button, the U0, to get back to our buttons down here. This next button that we have to choose is U3, and if I hit I and U3, it's design range. Basically that means tracing. Once I press U3, I will now go into my design range box, and here I have several options. Number one, I can contour coarser, finer. And what that means is that you can see this white box around the flower, and that means I can have more area that it's going to trace around. So when I do that, you can see that white box is going to go basically on the four furthest corners on that design. If I do contour finer, it will try to hug that design as much as possible to get a better trace for your design. You also have framing faster and framing slower. As soon as I hit framing faster, my framing slower comes up because now I have the ability to go back down. So that's going to be your movement of your frame when you do trace. The next thing down here is that I do have the needle. It's showing me what needle it is currently on. The frame movement is going to show me how much area, left, right, top, and bottom, my design is going to take. I also have that pantograph movement, should I need to move the pantograph while tracing. And then, of course, you can move your needle down or your needle up. Now, I always recommend first trace that you do, you want to do with the needle up, the needle in the upright position, so as to not potentially hit the hoop. So in order to trace, I do need to make sure my light is on the right side, so I'll hit that ZSK button. And I am now on the right side. You can see what I'm going to trace with the white box here. I'm in the medium speed, so I'm going to hit the start button and start tracing. This is going to go around my design range. You can see with the crosshair where it's going, and you can see on the machine how it was tracing. I can clearly see that my hoop and my needle, presser foot, or anything is not going to crash in any way. So if I'd like to do it again, maybe I'd like to do it a little bit slower, I can hit framing slower, and then I can hit the start button again. You can see the movement is much slower. Again, there's my crosshair on my actual controller itself, and then you can see that on the machine too. If I am tracing and in the middle of the trace I need to move that pantograph, I can certainly do that. So let's go back to tracing. We still are in the tracing view. I'm going to go ahead and start tracing. And as I trace, in the middle of the trace I say, oh, that's too close to the edge of my hoop. It might hit the hoop. Maybe I need to move it over. I can go over by hitting the ZSK button. over to the pantograph movement. I'm just going to use the 10 pulses at a time, and I can move it left or right depending upon which side I'm on. I can move it to the right, move it to the left, and it will remember that new position. And then I can continue tracing. I just have to hit that ZSK button, confirm the tracing, and I can keep tracing and make sure that that's not going to hit. So after I have traced, I do want to go back and start sewing. I can even trace with the presser foot down. So if I'm sure that it's going to fit inside that hoop, I can put that presser foot down, and I can put it down as far as I want, but you want to make sure that you're not putting it into the garment itself, or the needle into the garment itself, or into that needle hole, just to make sure that you're not going to have any problems, bending the needle or anything like that. So I do have that needle down. I can hit the start button, and you can see that it will trace. I'm going to go ahead and start framing faster. And you can see that that's going to be within my hoop. It's not going to hit anything, and I'm actually ready to stitch. So I'll go ahead and put that needle up. I will hit the previous to go back into my design and start stitching. Before I start stitching, I need to remove my sticker here. I've got everything lined up. My needles are threaded. My bobbin is full, and I'm ready to go. So after I've double checked, triple checked the tracing, the colors and everything, I'm ready to stitch. We just need to make sure that we have the correct design up. Our light is on the right hand side. This green button is going to go ahead and let me start sewing. So when I start sewing, I press the green button. I then will see that the machine will move needles. So let's start with the correct color. If I'd like to change speed of the design, I can do so right on here. This is our speed button. If I press that, you can now see I've got the double plus, the double minus, a single plus, and single minus, as well as special, and my speed settings. The double plus will put it at the highest speed. I'll go back to the speed settings. The double minus will go to that lowest speed. I'll go back to my speed settings. If I hit special, that is actually a special speed that I can input myself. So if I go back into the speed settings, I can hit normal. Now, if I press normal right now, it is the same as my special speed. So I'll go back to the speed settings. I can hit the single plus, and we'll go up incrementally. And I can also do that with the single minus. Now I'll hit the double plus, and again it goes to my fastest speed that I have programmed. If I would like to go into those speed settings, I can do that just by going here, going into my speed settings. And in my speed settings, you can now see that I have the ability to change the speed setup. We will cover the speed setup in another video, but I just want to show you here is where we can go and we can see there's our special speed, there's our jogging speed, there's our needle independent speed. We can also do needle specific. And again, this will be covered in another video. I will go ahead and confirm these, get back out and start the embroidery again. But I can change the speed while I am embroidering.